Hello, my friend, and welcome to the study for our October 2025 Almanac. October's Almanac is all about magic and mystery. This month we truly see around us the changing colours, both figurative and literal, in the forests and fields, in the towns and cities, and in our own personal surroundings. We're moving into the dream realm, the other world, dim and nebulous, half asleep at times. The days are shorter, and the nights lengthen, and we have more darkness every day. October is when autumn is now in full swing, and there's so much happening that it is hard to choose what things to put onto our almanac disc this month. There's such a variety of things happening. Nature is providing a rich palette of so many colors, and there's so much activity in the woodlands. But I really want to spend this time with you. So let's start in the skies. While October settles in, the skies events go on with the appearance of the constellation Satyrs, the sea monster slain by Perseus, the hero of our celestial show for the past few months. Satyrs comprises the red star Mira. There's also the Draconid meteor shower and the Orionid meteor shower, which begins as dust particles from Halley's Comet collide with the upper atmosphere and burn up, peaking on the 22nd of this month, with up to 15 meteors per hour, their tails pointing towards the constellation Orion. More prominent, though, is the October supermoon. In this lunar standstill year, it is even bigger and closer, with a harvest moon having happened on the 7th, and a second gibbous moon at the end of this month, preparing for the full moon of 5th of November. The moon is full at its closest point to Earth, called the perigee, and within 90% of its closest point, it is referred to as the supermoon, appearing up to 14% larger and 30% brighter than other full moons. Moving to our woodlands, fields, lakes, and seas, we surround ourselves with this activity of the changing season between summer and winter. Among Britain's native trees we see in splendour this month is the silver birch, with its spectacular autumn display of golden leaves contrasting its pale papery bark. In a breeze, the burnished foliage dances and shimmers. Birch saplings are often the first trees to colonize open areas. In the distant past, birch forests sprang up across the British Isles as the ice sheets retreated. Birches quickly take advantage of new road verges, railway cuttings, and brownfield sites. In autumn, the branches of birch trees are full of dark red catkins packed with tiny seeds. These will attract roving flocks of redpolls and siskins. There's also the blackthorn with its fruit, the sloe. Blackthorn is one of the most common and most widespread hedging trees in Britain on account of its dense growth. October is traditionally when its sloes are ripe enough to pick. These resemble dark, small plums, but they are very tart, so much so that even birds leave them untouched, preferring hawthorn, holly, and mountain ash berries. 3 species that will eat them, however, are missel thrushes, fieldfares, and hawfinches. Traditionally, sloes have been fermented and used for gin and whiskey. Mountain ash, also known as rowan, looks its best in early autumn when its heavy sprays of red berries paint our uplands. Rough ground and roadsides, bright red. Birds, particularly thrushes, love them. Though much less well known than rowan, also known as mountain ash, the guelder rose bears the brightest fruit. This small tree, or shrub, is found in hedgerows, scrub and woodland edges, reaching a few meters tall. It is native to the British Isles, but is named after the region of the Netherlands, where this ornamental variety of shrub rose was first grown. The scarlet berries, which hang in plump clusters, are often enjoyed by bullfinches. With its bright orange fruit, sea buckthorn produces garlands of golden berries from heavy clusters on thorny branches. These are popular with the migrant fieldfares, redwings, and blackbirds that have just made landfall from Scandinavia. Sea buckthorn is a tough shrub whose silvery foliage thrives in salty coastal air. It grows in dense thickets over sand dunes and is used to stabilize eroding slopes. Beech trees are producing a crunchy carpet of beech nuts in October. Also called mast, these nuts have a prickly husk that splits open to form a 4-pointed star. Beech nuts are favored by squirrels, deer, and finches, including the bramblings, orange and brown birds that often mingle with flocks of chaffinches, and these visit Britain each winter. October being the month of the arriving migrant birds from the north, some to stay and some on their way further south, stopping to stock up on the abundance that is produced in the autumn. October is also the month of the apple in the British Isles. All varieties are harvested, and we make tarts, pies, pastries, and sauces. But also the windfall apples left on the ground nourish an entire ecosystem. The sweet, fermenting juice attracts a host of life, the last of the year's wasps, butterflies, thrushes, badgers, foxes, and a variety of small mammals. The trees themselves are great homes for birds and insects as they become gnarly with age. Nuthatches and tree creepers feed on insects hiding under the bark, and woodpeckers make their nests in the old trunks' holes. Most domestic apple tree varieties found in orchards and gardens would have originated in Kazakhstan. Yet they have been cultivated so long there are at least 2,000 apple varieties in England alone. Europe's native apple, though, is the small but beautiful crabapple or malus that now can be found in many beautiful colours. In forest and field, autumn is the time we like to think of tiny rodents and hedgehogs readying their nests with hordes of nuts and berries and getting ready to snuggle in for a long, comfy winter. Resembling tubby mice, bank voles have tails so short they can be entirely missed. They sit squarely at the bottom of the food chain, living off a wealth of woodland and hedgerow plants, and sustaining a host of predators in turn. With an estimated 27 million bank voles in Britain in a typical year, their ecological significance is considerable. In October, their main occupation is gathering hazelnuts and seeds for their winter stores. Badgers spend autumns gorging on everything from the last year's maize to earthworms, acorns, and beech mast, rooting about in undergrowth for hidden delicacies. By winter, healthy badgers should weigh a third to half more than they did in summer. Of the many fungi that provide tasty treats in autumn is the ballerina waxcap. This pretty species, also known as the pink waxcap, has a pointed top with a delicate upturned skirt of soft pink. It soon starts to fray and fracture, making it seem almost fluffy. Waxcaps prefer wild, damp grassland, grazed but not fertilized or reseeded, and they, thus, are a sure sign of nature-friendly farming. On the even larger mammalian scene, the deer, red deer, fallow deer, and roe, take center stage as the males with their crowns of antlers rut in competition and treat the forest to a number of calls, bellows, and barks as they call out challengers. Fallow deer are most widespread and common of Britain's 4 naturalized deer, and easily recognized by their broad, flattened palmate antlers of mature bucks. The white rear of both male and female is bisected by a long, largely black tail. Autumn is a time of plenty for everyone, but especially wild boar, conjuring up images of medieval feasts and Roman legion banners alike. Wild boar feast on the fungi and fallen nuts and fruit of autumn's woodlands. They even eat tannin-rich acorns, which are poisonous to cattle and sheep, and distasteful to red squirrels. Their rooting and seed spreading play a key part in the forest's ecosystem. A fantastic season again for our feathered friends. The surest sign of autumn is the arrival of the winter thrushes, fieldfares and redwings from northern Europe and Iceland. They arrive from their long flight, hungry for berry-laden trees and shrubs, especially mountain ash, hawthorn, and sea buckthorn. These nocturnal migrant flocks make frequent calls as they stream overhead in the darkness. Uplands tend to empty of birds after the breeding season, before harsher weather sets in. White-throated dippers, closely associated with rushing mountain torrents, often move downstream. And for the next few months of autumn, they can be seen beside wide rivers and around the shores of lakes and reservoirs. Their far-carrying, rich, sweet song is prominent all year round. With long wings beating slowly, short-eared owls are like large pale moths. Seemingly without any effort, they fly low over rough grassland or salt marsh, patiently tacking back and forth as they search for voles. Around 1,400 pairs of short-eared owls nest in Britain, mostly in Scotland and northern England, according to the ebb and flow of vole populations. While in October many birds head to coasts for the winter, while the rest migrate south as far as the Mediterranean, more owls are arriving from northern breeding grounds in Scandinavia. It's impressive to think that these beautiful birds with their floaty flight style are capable of crossing the churning waters of the North Sea. October and November is when the ethereal tawny owl can be most seen. The youngsters that fledged in spring are now searching for territories of their own, seriously ruffling the feathers of the neighborhood's resident owls, resulting in lots of noise and activity. This month of supermoons makes spotting these nocturnal birds especially easy on clear evenings. October also sees wildfowl begin arriving from the north and east, swelling the flocks of resident ducks, geese, and swans. These will include pintails, which mostly come from western Russia. Some of autumn's best-dressed ducks, male pintails, have a long neck and a pair of extremely long central tail feathers, which give them a uniquely rakish profile. Pintails can be found in estuaries and coastal pools, including on the sea itself. Native waterfowl are now in full splendor of plumage, now that their molt is complete. Drakes are once again resplendent, and male teal in fresh breeding colors are some of Britain's most handsome wildfowl. They are also the smallest British ducks, weighing only a third or a quarter as much as the much chunkier mallards. Two crests, Firecrest and Goldcrest, vie for the title of smallest British bird. Both species weigh between 5 and 7 grams and measure about 9 centimeters. In comparison, a blue tit weighs twice as much. Firecrests are hyperactive sprites, moving through foliage and frequently hovering in midair to pick off tiny insects and spiders. They are particularly fond of ivy-covered tree trunks, but they're far scarcer than goldcrests, with just 550 breeding pairs in England. October, when numbers are swelled by autumn migrants, is the best chance of catching these crests in action. The goldcrest is resident wherever conifers grow, and also frequents mixed and deciduous woods. In October, numbers are swollen by immigrants from northern Europe and Russia, making landfall on the east coast, sometimes in the hundreds. One October mystery is Pallas's warbler, about the size of a tiny goldcrest and named after the German zoologist and explorer Peter Simon Pallas. It spends its summer in pine, spruce, and larch woods on mountains in the Siberian taiga. By a natural miracle, it somehow makes its way to Britain, where reports of this hyperactive forest sprite, though still rare, now average 60 records every autumn. Most come in October along Britain's eastern and southern coasts. Usually this species moves to southern China and Southeast Asia for the winter, and it's thought that a handful might get caught in fast-moving depressions and are forced far to the west instead. Or perhaps the migrants become disoriented, which might explain why British sightings do not always coincide with unfavorable weather systems en route. Either way, their appearance on our shores remains a natural mystery. The comma butterfly makes a ragged silhouette with its orangey camouflaged wings and does a fantastic impression of a torn dead leaf, which is usually enough to escape the hungry birds. It can be seen on sunny days well into November, feeding up to get ready for winter hibernation, sipping sugar from the last few bruised blackberries or fallen apples and plums. Moving to the water, a very curious autumn sight is the small spotted cat shark. Not really a shark at all, but the remains of a shark egg. As seaweed dies back in the autumn and rougher seas return, mermaids' purses can be found on the beach. These are the empty, leathery egg capsules of sharks, skates, and rays, with curly tendrils at the corners. They attached to the developing cases to seaweed underwater. These cases can be from any of a dozen or so species, but those of the small spotted cat sharks, often known as lesser spotted dogfish, are among the most frequently found on British beaches and called fondly mermaids' purses. If you follow the bears and they're fattening up for hibernation, you know it is the season of the salmon run. In the British Isles, Atlantic salmon and sea trout head upstream to spawn in gravelly riverbeds at this time of year. Muscular, powerful fish, they migrate mainly at night, guided by a combination of chemical and magnetic cues, another of nature's mysteries. Each fish is so sensitive to its aquatic environment that it can even taste the rinsing of human hands in water, so it's said. This sixth fish sense helps them to find their way back upstream every year. This October we return to the Hebrides. The Isle of Skye, Antinanshi, the land of the fair folk, is one of those places where landscape, legend, and atmosphere all combine to make it seem as if it is at the door to a magical world. Few places in Britain feel so innately otherworldly. An island where geology, weather, and myth seem to conspire in equal measure. The Isle of Skye, largest of the Inner Hebrides, stretches like a ragged hand into the Atlantic, each finger a peninsula fringed with cliffs and sea lochs. Its Gaelic name, Anmhailin Scianix, has been variously translated as the Winged Isle or the Notched Isle because of its coastline twists and folds into 1,000 inlets, as if it had been carved by giants or spirits. At the island's dark heart rise the Quayland Mountains, jagged basalt peaks of almost unearthly severity. The black Quayland, sharp and shadowed, are born of ancient volcanic rock. The pale red Quaylands are gentler domes of granite. To stand below them is to feel both awe and unease. They look less like part of the earth than fragments of some older, broken world. Mist gathers quickly here, one moment sunlight, the next a veil of white cloud, as though the mountains are withdrawing into their own realm. These are the mountains of Skye, the shadowy warrior woman of Gaelic legend, who trained heroes in the art of war. Her fortress, Skye, the fortress of shadows, is said to have stood on the Slit Peninsula. Even now the Quaylands seem haunted by her presence, lonely, stern, half divine. Below the Quaylands, rearing black and sharp against the sky, the fairy pools gleam like polished glass. The path dips into boggy ground, and already the sound of running water threads the air. The mountains ahead look less like a part of this world than a jagged wall between realms. The people of Skye, say the Skye, the fairy folk, live in such places where mist curls low and silence holds its breath. The path narrows, and then you hear it, the song of the river, tumbling in cascades from the mountain. The first pool appears suddenly, its waters impossibly clear, a glass blue window into the earth. The water is strikingly transparent, giving the pools a jewel-like appearance, especially when sunlight cuts through the misty mountain air. The old people whispered that if you leaned too far, you might see faces beneath the surface. Not drowned souls, but the fae, waiting in their crystal halls. At certain hours of dusk or dawn, the pools open like doorways. Cross those thresholds, they say, and you return changed, if you return at all. Above, the black ridges of the Quaylands brood, and it was here, the story goes, that Skye, the shadowy one, made her stronghold, her fortress. Skye stood on the far edge of the island, but her presence haunts the whole of Skye. She was no ordinary woman, warrior, prophetess, enchantress. Young men crossed the sea to learn her secrets of war. Among them came Cuchulainn, Ireland's greatest hero, who left with the deadly spear-throwing art she alone could teach. You can imagine him here, perhaps, a boy not yet tempered into legend, standing by these same pools, the spray cold against his skin, as Skye's voice carried over the water. To train under her was to step into another world, to be broken down and remade. The pools fall one after another, each linked by narrow falls. As you follow them upstream, it feels like an initiation, each pool a threshold, each waterfall a gate. The farther you go, the quieter it becomes, until only the sound of water and the wind of the quilins remains. At the last pool you pause again. It gleams like polished glass, dark at the centre. Perhaps Skye herself drank here. Perhaps the Fae still guard it. The locals will tell you not to linger too long, not to listen too closely to the music of the water. For this is Skye, island of shadows and thresholds, and the fairy pools are not only beautiful, they are enchanted. Their crystal waters, blue-green against the black rock, tumble through a series of small falls and pools, and still, indeed, they must be inhabited by the Skye, beautiful and perilous beings who live beneath the hills. Will we choose to bathe here? If we do, we risk enchantment or revelation. There's more magic on Skye. In the north, the Trotnerish Ridge rises in strange formations, the earth buckled and twisted by ancient landslides. The Queering is an amphitheatre of rock spires and grassy terraces, where mist drifts and crows circle like spirits. The Old Man of Store, a tall column of basalt, standing apart from its mountain, looks from afar like a watchful figure turned to stone. And indeed legend says he was once a giant, frozen in grief or defiance. This is a landscape as myth. The land itself seems alive, as though remembering stories older than speech from another world. Near Uch lies the Fairy Glen, a miniature landscape of cone-shaped hills, mossy terraces, and a tiny loch. It feels like a model world, a place for smaller beings. Local stories say that here the Sikh hold their revels. Visitors sometimes leave coins or pebbles in spirals, but the older folk caution against it. One shouldn't meddle with fairy customs. Skye's lochs, Dunvegan, Sneethort, and Kurisk mirror the sky in stillness. At Dunvegan Castle, seat of Clan MacLeod, hangs the fairy flag, a silken banner said to have been given to the clan by a fairy bride. When unfurled in battle, it would bring victory or protection, but only 3 times, and legend says it has already been used twice. Indeed, Skye's folklore is rich with tales of Selkies, the seal people who shed their skins and walk on land, the blue men of Minch, sea spirits who challenge sailors in storms. Answer their riddles wrongly, and your ship will sink. The Kuski, the green fairy hound, whose silent pursuit foretells of death. The washer at the ford, or Penny, who washes the clothes of those soon to die, a Highland cousin of the Banshee. Each glen and shore seems to hold a haunting, ruined chapel where lights are seen at night, a waterfall where a piper vanished into the hill, or a loch whose dark surface hides an ancient curse. To travel through Skye is to move between weather and mood. Sunlight on the moors turns them to gold, and an hour later rain sweeps in, and everything vanishes into grey mist. The locals call it 4 seasons in a day. But it's more than meteorological. It's metaphysical. The island feels sentient, shifting, half in this world and half in another. That is why Skye has always drawn poets and painters, mystics and wanderers. Its beauty is not tame. It is numinous, the kind of beauty that both invites and warns, as though you are welcome to look, but not to stay too long. The Isle of Skye is not merely a place of scenic grandeur. It is a living mythos. Mountains and lochs and glens are the language of its stories. Here the boundaries between history and legend, between human and otherworldly, are porous. To stand on Skye's cliffs, or by its dark waters, is to sense what the old Gaelic poets knew, that the land itself remembers, and that to listen closely is to hear both the wind and the whisper of the Skye in it. Here, my friend, we can pause in the autumn, on the edge between two worlds, the world of the living, breathing summer season, and the dark, dreaming winter sleep. We prepare to recede into our library of dreams, our retreat in the dim, cool evenings, where we can float between imagination and reality, and forget where the boundary lies. Dr. Samuel Johnson, accompanied by James Boswell, whose trip to Scotland we looked at in July in our almanac, visited the Isle of Skye in the autumn of 1773. During their famous journey to the western islands of Scotland. This was part of a longer 2-month tour of the Hebrides and the Highlands, undertaken partly out of curiosity about a world that was then vanishing, the old Gaelic clan-based society that had so recently suffered suppression after the Jacobite uprisings. Johnson and Boswell set out from the mainland in late August 1773 after sailing from the mainland across the Kyle-Ray Strait. They landed on Skye and spent about 10 days there, from early to mid-September. They were guests of the MacDonalds and the MacLeods, the great island clans, staying in their houses, often semi-ruined by the time but still centres of hospitality. They first went to Armadale and Sleat. They came ashore here, welcomed by Sir Alexander MacDonald of Sleat and his wife, the redoubtable Lady Margaret MacDonald at Armadale. Johnson admired her intellect and dignity, calling her a woman of more than common sense. They journeyed northwards through the island, visiting Raasay, the small island just off Skye's east coast, as guests of MacLeod of Raasay. Johnson loved the civility of their household, calling it a new scene of life. They passed then through Portree, then a small rough settlement, the Kingsport, where they lodged briefly, before visiting Dunvegan Castle, the seat of MacLeod, and were impressed by its ancient lineage. Johnson wrote warmly of the MacLeod's hospitality and of the wild dignity of the castle's situation. From there they travelled northward through Trotnerish and Uig, though the roads were often tracks across moor and bog, requiring ponies and guides. When Johnson visited, Skye was on the cusp of change. The clan system had been dismantled, the old Jacobite cause lost, and the Highlands were slowly being drawn into modern Britain. Yet in its music, Gaelic speech, and landscape, the island remained profoundly itself, and Johnson's journey captured the moment when the old world still breathed. Thank you, my friend, for coming on this journey with me on our October Almanac through the liminal spaces in this exciting autumn time, also one of mystery, magic, where two worlds meet, and how many other worlds. Be good to yourself, be kind to others, and as always, be extraordinary.